This story happened to me when I just turned 20 years old. My parents and I lived in the same small town at that time. In a place where, in principle, everyone remembers each other by sight. My father worked in an auto parts store, or rather, he was its owner, and therefore our wealth allowed us to have a good two-story house. The second floor was very tiny. There were two rooms in it. I lived in one and in the other. The person who gave birth to this story, my sister. At the time I turned 20, she was only 19. By that time, I had already graduated from college and majored in automotive mechanics. And I worked, as you might have guessed, at my father's store. Jenny, that was my sister's name, was finishing her last year at the same college. But not as an auto mechanic, but as a computer designer or something like that. And in general, she was quite a quiet girl and at first glance, even modest. When we were still children, like a typical brother and sister, they hated each other and constantly quarreled about and without. But years have passed, we have grown up, and all this nonsense has gone away by itself. And now we had the most ordinary, warm, friendly relations. I never really thought about her as a girl. I had a girlfriend once, and the relationship was very strong. But they're over, and there was no suitable candidate on the horizon for me yet. And my sister was so modest that it was not that she had never had a boyfriend. But it seemed that one would not appear at all. It didn't really bother me. But one day, I suddenly noticed that my sister had undergone significant changes over the past few years. I suddenly realized that my sister had become a very pretty girl by the age of 19. A beautiful, refined figure appeared, and her face acquired very delicate, even childish features. Now, more and more often at dinner or breakfast, when the whole family was gathered, and my sister was sitting right in front of me, my gaze ran over her open neck. I started to get interested in little things, like what she would go to bed in and stuff like that. I know it all looks very strange, and that's not counting the fact that she is my sister, but I was still interested in all this. At first, it even scared me. I kept trying to remind myself that this was my sister after all, and I think I even succeeded. But soon such antics of my mind provoked an increase in the level of our communication. I became even more friendly with her, and Ginny responded in kind. More and more often in the evenings, just before going to bed, we sat in each other's rooms and talked. I liked it all. I really liked it. And after a while, I realized that I had not just brotherly feelings for her, but the strongest sympathies, and why lie about it? I realized that I love her. I love my sister Ginny, and it seemed to me more and more that she also had some feelings for me. One day I stayed up late in her room. We talked about the future, dreamed of adventures, just like children. My parents had already gone to bed. The house was quiet and dark, so even we talked in whispers. It was very late when Ginny said she wanted to sleep. I don't know what I was thinking at the time, but the next second, such a strong fear seized me that I was afraid to even move. In an instant, all possible options flew through my head. I thought that she would immediately push me away, maybe scream, hit me, or even curse, but everything happened differently. Instead of taking any drastic action, Ginny slowly leaned away from me. Her eyes were wide open, and surprise and confusion appeared on her face. And before I wanted to start explaining or apologizing, I even opened my mouth, but she didn't let me make a sound. We looked at each other for a minute. Nothing more serious happened that night, but that night was the beginning of everything that happened to us. Now we locked ourselves in a room every night, now in mine, now in hers, and in the morning, as if nothing had happened, we became brother and sister again, and only rare glances could give us away. A week or two after we started our secret evening meetings, something happened that forever predetermined the course of events. We were lying together on Ginny's bed in her room, as we always do now. That night, everything happened. We reached the highest level of intimacy. We spent a lot of nights like this now, and we realized more and more that we love each other. One day, we decided to talk and discuss everything that was happening. Listen, she began. Do you understand that all this is somehow not right? I don't care, I replied sincerely. The seriousness on her face had subsided somewhat, and I could see from her eyes that she didn't care either. Basically, that was the end of the conversation, and everything was fine, except for some seemingly minor problems that arose from time to time in my sister's head. But night was falling, and with deft body movements, I was knocking everything unnecessary out of with her head. The year was coming to an end. The problems, which at first seemed insignificant, gradually turned into real problems. We had already determined exactly how serious our feelings were, and this created some difficulties. We knew perfectly well that we couldn't hide forever, and to be honest, we didn't want to. We dreamed about how we would live together, not hiding from the truth in a veil of secrets. At some point, love clouded our consciousness so much, and our sense of reality disappeared, that we decided to tell everyone the truth about us. And we thought to start with our parents, the people closest to us. It was scary. I will not hide, but the consequences turned out to be much scarier. One Sunday morning, when the whole family was at breakfast, I started this conversation. "Mom, Dad, we wanted to tell you something." I started. Surprisingly, the whole story came out easily, in one breath. My parents were shocked. Jenny and I could tell by the way they stared at me for about 3 more minutes. Not moving. Silently. Mom couldn't stand it first. "What did you just say?" She quickly looked from me to Jenny. "No, you don't mean to say, are you kidding, son?" Her father interrupted her in a loud-based voice. No, what is it? How is it?" Mom clutched her head and began to rush around the room. "What will people say now? I advise you both to forget about these games right now." My father continued, "But these are not games," Jenny said without looking up. "Yes, we love each other and we want to be together." I said after that, the parents just exploded. My father wouldn't listen to anything else. Mom was still rushing around the house and wailing, screaming, and even crying. Over the next 3 days, after reviewing a mountain of notebooks, she found the long-forgotten number of, as she said, the best psychotherapist, and even made an appointment. Fortunately for us, this psychotherapist was a very busy person, and the next free day was only in a couple of months. All this has had a very strong impact on Jenny and me. We even ended our relationship for a while. We walked in silence, sad ones, empty, but in the end, feelings took over. Anyway, and our meetings resumed. Only now we were forced to meet somewhere far from home during the day because our parents were watching us and checking our rooms at night. So we suffered for about another month until Jenny passed the last final exam and finally got her diploma. And so we were walking along a small old street on the other side of the city. The weather was cloudy. No, the sun was shining, but from time to time it drizzled and a cool wind blew. "So what do we do now?" Jenny asked, shuffling her feet on the wet asphalt. "I do not know." I wanted to answer, but suddenly a decision came to my mind. "We will run away." And I began to describe to Jenny the plan that had just matured in me for our grand escape, the way we move to another city and start living together. At first, this idea caused some distrust in both Jenny and even me. But then, after weighing everything and discussing, we came to the conclusion that we simply had no other way out, and so we decided to run away. From everything, from everyone, this idea really enlivened and inspired both of us. The mood has returned to us again. We returned home tipsy, and we had to force ourselves to smile in order not to give rise to suspicion. The escape was scheduled for the night from Saturday to Sunday. I don't know why we decided that. After waiting for the parents to lie down and peace reigned in the house, we began to carry out our plans. Taking our backpacks with our belongings, we quietly left the house and headed to the only bus station in the city. We boarded the earliest bus. It was a long drive, about 4 hours to the neighboring city. So after sitting down in our seats, we fell asleep on each other's shoulder. Jenny slept most of the way and woke up only when the bus was already approaching the final stop of our route. We got off the bus just as the first rays were creeping along the roads. Everything was wonderful. We were on the threshold of a new life. Adrenaline was pumping through my blood. On this day, the first thing we did was rent an apartment for ourselves from an elderly, kind grandmother for mere pennies. After that, we went for a walk along the nearby streets. Of course, it was sad that I had to give up everything, but we had no other way. We left a farewell letter to our parents, asking for forgiveness and all that sort of thing. Our next step was to get a job. After that, everything quickly returned to normal. There was an opportunity to live. We were introduced to everyone, not as brother and sister, but as a young unmarried couple, and everything was fine. We loved each other more and more every day, every night. We started to have acquaintances and friends, But the deeper we delved into all this, the more acute the problems that sometimes seemed to pop up. Questions about the future began to be raised more and more often. What are we going to do next? Live? How? I heard that close relatives are not allowed to have children at all, and live a lie all your life, and everything like that. Of course, I understood all this, but I tried not to take it into account. No matter how hard we tried to deal with it, it was still piling on top of us. And most of the time, Ginny couldn't stand it. She has been very vulnerable since childhood, but here it is. It happened on the same sunny and cloudy day as when we decided to escape. It was a day off. Everything was fine last night. But the morning started with screams. We were fighting so much that even the dishes were flying in the house, all. That was the limit. The top of all this, horror that has been accumulating all this time in us and has finally spilled out. At the end of our conversation, Ginny allegedly came to the conclusion that she was to blame for everything. After all, she and not me or us as it happened before. Then the conclusions changed again. I couldn't listen to this anymore. I left the house, slamming the door. If I had known that was the last time I saw Ginny alive, I wandered the streets of the city for an hour or two until I came across some kind of clinic of Dr. Dickinson. In the reception room, I was immediately directed to the office. It was a middle-aged man. He was wearing a formal suit and old-fashioned round glasses. "What's bothering you?" he began. In the next 30 minutes, I told him my whole story up to today. I don't know. Maybe I just needed to talk it out, but I immediately felt a little better. At first, the doctor looked at me with disbelief or even with a certain contempt. It was red on his face and especially in his eyes. "Are you judging me, doctor? Let's just say that you understand that all this will never be able to fit into the framework of modern society." Of course, I understood that. Would I have come to him then? "Doctor, can I ask you a question? Love. Does love fit into the framework? But we are talking about different concepts." "No, doctor. How can love be different? As far as I know, love is one thing. And in our case, too." Now the doctor's expression had changed. He looked like a man enthusiastically reading an adventure novel. "And we have the right. We deserve to live like everyone else." I was already up and heading for the exit when the doctor stopped me. "I think you should go back to yours now." Apparently, he didn't know what to call her. "Better to return. You must determine for yourself whether it is love or passion. If this is really love, you will cope with all the difficulties, because there are no boundaries for love." And I left, leaving the doctor to think I was walking home. Yes, indeed, the doctor was right. It was necessary to figure everything out. It was already the height of the day, or rather, it was already waning. I went up the stairs, he opened the door, he went into the room, and froze. Jenny was lying on the floor. There was a knife nearby. She was lying in such a position as if she had decided to lie down to sleep. Only the hand protruded to the side. I walked slowly over to her. Tears started flowing from my eyes. Without uttering a sound, I fell to my knees beside her. I saw a crumpled piece of paper in her hand. "I'm sorry, my dear, but we can't get away from this. I found a way out. There won't be me. There won't be any problems. Sorry." After reading this, I finally collapsed next to my sister. "What have you done? Why?" I whispered over and over again, but Jenny didn't answer anymore. She couldn't say a word anymore. She left me. I don't know where I got the strength to get up and go outside. I stood in the middle of the road, raising my head to the sky and listened to the raindrops falling from the sky. My soul was torn apart. Everything. It was the end. I couldn't move. I also wanted to fly with this rain from a height and crash violently on the asphalt. That was the day it ended. The problems are gone. Life is over. The problems are gone. It's been a long time since then, but people still fell in love, got married, and divorced. I can't tell you how the lives of everyone I've met have turned out, but I know that Dr. Dickinson has seriously taken up the issues of non-traditional relationships and even received some awards for his report. My parents didn't remember us anymore. At least I never heard from them again. Well, as for me, I got lost somewhere in the world in search of myself, alone, without friends, without family, without a future.